Hi, everyone. This is your host, Kristen Howe, and I am so excited to welcome you to our call with today's guest, Dr. Dain Heer. Dain travels the world facilitating advanced classes in Access Consciousness. When he's not facilitating, he's busy co-hosting a radio show entitled Conversations in Consciousness with Gary Douglas, the founder of Access. Dain has also appeared on the Today Show Toronto, Gaiam TV with Lisa Garr, The Good Morning Show New Zealand, The Circle and Morning Show Australia, and many internationally syndicated talk radio shows. He's the author of 9 books on the topics of embodiment, healing, money, and relationships, and has developed a unique energy transformation process for individuals and groups called the energetic synthesis of being. Dain's completely different approach to healing teaches people to tap into and recognize their own abilities and knowing. The energetic change that's possible is fast and truly dynamic. And on today's call with Dain, you will discover pragmatic and practical tools that can easily change the things you've always wanted to change and haven't been able to up until now. You'll discover a totally different way of exploring what you're truly capable of. And like I said before, the energetic transformation is fast and truly dynamic. You will come out of judgment of you for being as different as you are and begin to acknowledge the magic you are capable of. And this is the beginning of creating your life and your reality on your terms. You'll experience the energy and vibration of consciousness where everything exists and nothing is. And you'll explore an energetic space of being that allows awareness to play with magic. And together with the dynamic tools of Access Consciousness, this space can give you a starting point for creating your reality on your terms. You'll also be introduced to the Access Clearing Statements and the set of tools from Access Consciousness that could possibly change your whole life and your whole reality completely. So Dain, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the call.
Kristen, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I love your energy. I can't wait to share you with everybody. You and I managed to laugh quite a bit before we even got started, so I love that we sort of got the vibration raised up a bit. Can you start off by sharing a couple of minutes of your story? You know, what are some of the major turning points that have allowed you to manifest your current level of success?
Well, actually 13 years ago, I was at the place where I was literally going to kill myself if things didn't change. And I was one of those people who was into self-help, and I was reading books all the time, and I had 5 books open at all times. I was trying to change my life, and it was like, I'd read books, I'd do seminars, and things would change, and then 3 days later, it felt like they were back in the same position. And I was so frustrated. I was a chiropractor. I was living in Santa Barbara. I was living in paradise, supposedly, and I felt like I was the only person. I remember driving to work and looking left and looking right at the people on the freeway thinking, wow, why am I the only unhappy person here? And it was so frustrating to me to not be able to change that because I was one of those people who was working it. If I got a tool, I would use it. And yet they weren't working. And so I was just tired of waking up frustrated and unhappy and tired of struggling with money and relationships and all the stuff that was in my head. And I said, universe, you got 6 months. Either my life changes or I'm killing myself, and I don't care which it is. I thought I was going to get out. I thought I was going to be able to, I made my demand. I drew the line in the sand. I was like, yay, I get to get out of here. And yet a week later, I found something called Access Consciousness. I had one session, and it literally changed everything that I knew was possible. During the session, I started giggling like a little kid, and it was the first sense of peace I'd had in almost 3 years. And it was the first time I remember knowing everything was okay, everything always had been, and everything always would be. And I literally never contemplated killing myself again because the energy of my life changed so much. But even more valuable than not being at the place where, okay, I don't want to kill myself, is the changes that I've been looking for my whole life started to happen. And I started using these tools, and they started changing my life so much. I'm like, man, I want to let people know this exists. And I've seen thousands of people across the world who have had similar changes to what I've experienced. So that's why I'm sitting here talking to you right now.
And that's why I'm so excited to have you sitting here talking to us. And this is an amazing group of people that show up for these calls, so I know they're just going to be over the moon with what you have to share. So talk to us a little bit more about Access Consciousness, what it is. Obviously, it changed your life, so, are you still working with it, all of that good stuff, just so that we get familiar with what is this Access Consciousness thing?
Well, basically, it's a set of tools, techniques, information, and sort of a philosophy, if you will, of a way of looking at the world, which allows you the capacity to change anything you desire to change and have the tools to actually do it. And, it's been co-created by myself, by the founder of Access Consciousness, Gary Douglas, who started it, way back in 1990, earlier than 1990, 1988. And it's also been a co-creation by the people who come to Access. So basically, it's like this. If, let's say you wake up unhappy and, you've got a mortgage to pay and you don't know how you're going to do it. And it's a way of changing the way you feel about it, but also changing your capacity to change the situation itself. And that's what I think is so valuable about it, is it's got tools in the daily situations of life to change the things that you don't know how to change. And one of the things that used to happen for me is I'd have people go, well, do affirmations. And I'd be like, okay, and I'd do 100 of them. If they said do 10, I would do 100. If they said do 100, I would do 1,000, because I was like, man, I'm going to work it. I'm going to use the tools that I have at my disposal. And unfortunately, so many of the tools that we've been given are less than effective, ineffective, or just totally don't work at all. And it's such a sadness, because there's a totally different world that we can live if we just had the tools to make it happen.
Perfect. And I know you're going to share some of the tools with us. So is that something you can do right now? I know we talked about there's something called access clearing statements, and this is something I've been exposed to a bit. I remember the first time I heard anything, I was like, well, wait, what was that? So can you share with us a little bit of some of the tools?
Yeah. Well, let's start with there's a few real simple things that people can start to institute in their lives. First thing to get, that if you just take this tool and use it in the rest of your life, it'll be worth the time you spent listening to this call. And that is that what's true makes you feel lighter. A lie makes you feel heavier. So when you hear something that somebody says, if it makes you feel heavier, it's not true for you. It may be true for them. It may be true for everybody else. It may be true for someone else, but it's not true for you. So what's true for you will always make you feel lighter. A lie for you will always make you feel heavier. And so you want to have this as an awareness, because when you do, what happens is you start to look at the world from a different place. What most of us do is somebody says something to us, and we try to make it true even when it makes us feel really heavy. If you can look and go, wow, the fact that my mother just said I'm selfish and I'll never have any money made me feel heavy, okay, it must not be true. But a lot of us, our mothers, our parents, or somebody else will say that to us, and we go, oh, that's true. Now, how can I undo it? Well, when you take on somebody else's sack of junk, the only thing to do is to recognize it's a sack of junk. It's a sack of poo. Get rid of it. You don't need it anymore.
Okay. I love that, because do you want to tell us how you really feel? I just love how, that's just like, it's so that. Okay, so is it really that easy just to go, okay, that's not real, it's a sack of poo, I don't need that anymore? I mean, how do we make it, because that sounds so easy when you say it, but how do we truly make it that easy?
Well, that's exactly what this is about, because in truth, it is actually that easy. And the willingness to allow it to be that easy is a whole other story, though, because a lot of us think that change has to be struggle, and it has to be trauma and drama, and it has to be a lot of pain and suffering. Otherwise, I don't know what the otherwise is. We just seem to have some reason why we seem to need it that way. Otherwise, it has no value to it. If change were that easy, everybody would do it. It's like, well, if everybody knew it were that easy and were willing to have it, it could be. So, you alluded to the clearing statement earlier, and that's one of the tools. But one that I'd like to maybe go into before that, and then maybe bring that in after, is the idea that 98% of your thoughts, your feelings, and your emotions don't actually belong to you. In other words, you're like a big psychic radio receiver, and you've been picking up the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions of other people your whole life, thinking they were yours. Well, what if they weren't? What if you're actually, like, for example, if you've ever been having a really great day and you are just on cloud nine and everything is going great and you're driving to work and all of a sudden you feel sad or you feel angry. Well, what most of us do is we start to go, why am I sad? Why am I angry? And yet, if you realize, what if it's not yours? What if there's somebody driving next to you that has that? And you've been picking it up your whole life, the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of other people thinking they're yours. And this is what I've seen is 98% of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions aren't yours. And the way to undo it is to ask when you're in the middle of anger, trauma, drama, or judge, just go, okay, who does this belong to? The shortcut for it is who does this belong to? And you ask this to the thoughts, the feelings, and the emotions. And what happens is if it lightens up at all, it's not yours. You don't have to know who it belongs to. If it lightens up at all, it's not yours. Just return it to sender. And literally, if you'll do this for every thought, feeling, emotion, judgment, and heaviness you have for 3 days, at the end of 3 days, you'll walk around like you're in a walking, talking meditation.
Wow. And you know what? That is actually, I had learned about this, and that's something that I did, and I have to say it's absolutely true. It's an unbelievably freeing thing to go, whose is this? Because it's not mine. So, yeah, I mean, I completely believe. Okay, so, yeah, I would love if you could talk about, because you say there's a totally different way of exploring what we're truly capable of. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they're so stuck trying to fix what's happening right now that they've even completely forgotten the amazing things they're truly capable of. So how do we start to explore that?
Well, one of the things you want to do, one of the big things about access consciousness is actually starting to ask questions. And a question actually allows you to start to access what you know that goes beyond this reality. And I think there's a fundamental thing that we need to get, and that is most of us are functioning as though we're in this tiny little box that's inside of a labyrinth that if we think if we can finally get outside of that darn labyrinth, then everything will be okay, except once you get outside of the labyrinth, you're actually in this upside down fishbowl like you're in the Truman Show. And so we've been trying to get out of the labyrinth, except outside of the labyrinth is the Truman Show bowl over us. But what's actually possible is something beyond that upside down fishbowl, beyond the labyrinth and beyond the box, which is also beyond this reality. And I think if the seekers of the world, the people that are listening to this call right now, because the people that are not the seekers of the world are not listening to this call. They don't want something different. They want to stay in the same box that they've been in forever and don't have any desire or need to change it. And that's okay. That's no problem. But you want to realize if you're one of the seekers of the world, you're different. And it's because you know that there's something greater available that you have that difference. But rather than making that a wrongness, what if that's one of the greatest rightnesses of you? What if that's one of the things that will actually allow you to start to have access to everything you've desired? What if rather than you being different, what if rather than that being wrong, what if it's actually part of the greatness of you? And what if when you acknowledge it, all the things we want to change, the unhappiness, the depression, the relationship problems, the money problems, what if all those things could start to change when you realize, wow, you know what? My whole life I've been different. What if that's not a wrongness? What if I'm aware there's something greater, but nobody's ever shown me how to access it? So this is about accessing that. It's the reason it's called access consciousness, because it's about accessing your consciousness. And access point of view is consciousness is where everything exists and nothing is judged. If you could imagine having every part of you without having to judge any of it, and if you could imagine coming out of any part of you that you've been judging or ever judged, and imagine living in a world where you could embrace reality on those terms, that's really what this is about.
Okay, I love the whole concept of coming out of judgment of us and sort of accepting and even, would you say, celebrating the fact that we're different? Is that a good way of putting it?
Absolutely. I would say definitely celebrating our difference. It's one of, and so let's look at this for a moment. So let's use the clearing statement that you mentioned before, which I'm going to say the words, and basically it works like this. And for example, in the room you're in, the walls look solid, right? But science tells us it's 99.9999999% space. It just looks solid because that's the way we constructed it at one point in time to make it appear so it would hold up our house. Okay, cool. Well, what if the limitations in your life are exactly the same way? What if they just look solid? What if they're actually 99.999% space and you just created them at a point in time that way to hold up the walls of the limitations you've created in your life? And if you could access that space, then could you walk through the limitation as though it weren't even there? That's basically what this is asking. It's kind of like a magic wand. That's the way I like to call it, because I'm kind of like a big 6-year-old in a lot of ways. You know, it's like I really like ice cream, I really like to run and play, and I really like to have fun. And because I couldn't do all those things 13 years ago because my life was so much pain and suffering, it was like I really wanted to die. Well, now I've had access to that 6-year-old again, and it's like, imagine if you had that magic wand that you always hoped you could have when you were a little kid, where you go, you know, like Harry Potter, you go, presto changeo, and all of a sudden the thing that looks so big and menacing, you know, this big dragon in front of you turns into a tiny kitten, and you're like, oh my God, this is so cool. Well, that's what this clearing statement can do. So let's do this since we talked about the judgment piece. So here's the way it works. We'll ask a question, like, for example, so what judgment do you have of you that keeps you from actually liking and loving you as much as you would like to? And just get the energy of that, because every question brings up an energy. You know, there's some people out there who say, don't ask questions, just know what you know. And my point of view is the way you get to know what you know is by asking questions. So when you ask a question, it brings up an energy. It brings up an energy of either what's sticking you or what else is possible that you don't even know yet. So the question again, so what judgments do you have of you that keep you from liking you and loving you as much as you would like to? And all of those, will you now, and this is the key, will you now destroy and uncreate them, please? And Kristen, you get to be point person.
I love it. I love being able to sort of be the guinea pig for everyone and experience it for us all. So yes.
Cool. And now the clearing statement. Right and wrong, good and bad, pod and pock, all 9, shorts, boys, and beyonds. Okay. So some of you listening will notice something happening. You may not even be able to define it. But basically what it's doing, the core of that clearing statement, and the thing is, in the package, there's an explanation of the clearing statement, but the core of that clearing statement is something called POC and POD. POC stands for the point of creation of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions immediately preceding your decision to create this limitation. POD is the point of destruction of the thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And so what it is whether you created something that limits you, or whether you destroyed something you had going on that was a greatness of you and a possibility of you, a different point of view you had that was wonderful in the world, and you went, oh, nobody will have it, so I'm going to hide it. It undoes that from the moment you did it. Whether it was last week or 100 billion years ago, it doesn't matter. It unlocks it just the same, which changes your present, which will also change your future. So the way this works is we'll undo this thing about judging you. And is there more than one layer of it? Of course. You know, we've been judging ourselves ever since we've been on the planet, unfortunately. You know, thinking that we're judgmental, and the only person we really judge is ourselves. But we've been judging ourselves for a long time. So running one layer of it will change some of it. And then if you listen to the call again, it'll change more. And every time you run it, it changes more and more and more. So the more you listen to it, the freer you get, which is one of the beauties of it. But what it's doing is it's unlocking wherever you locked the idea that you had to judge you in place with this particular question. Well, if we ask another question, we can unlock something else. So that's the gist of it. So I wonder if I might run that a couple more times and just give people an example of how it works and maybe start lightening some more things in their lives.
Fantastic.
Cool. So what judgments do you have of you that may not even be yours? Ooh, let's do that one. What judgments do you have of you that you bought from other people that create a limitation in how much you can love you, like you, and enjoy being you? Everything that is times a godzillion, and a godzillion is a number so big only God knows. Will you destroy and uncreate it, please?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pod and pock, all 9, shorts, boys, and beyonds. Now, the interesting thing is I ask, will you destroy and uncreate it? And sometimes people go, I don't want to destroy. Destruction is bad. And I'm like, let me ask you a question. If you were going to heal someone's cancer, wouldn't you have to destroy the limitation or the point of view that was creating the cancer in order to do that? And they go, oh, yeah. So basically what destruction is destruction is undoing what is allowing this thing to exist. And uncreate means let's destroy the structure of limitation, okay, which is destroy. And then uncreate is let's stop putting our creative energy into this limitation. Instead, let's put our creative energy into creating for us instead of holding these fixed points of view in place that cause us to judge ourselves. So, one more time. So what judgments do you have of you that aren't even yours? They keep you from loving you, liking you, and enjoying being you as much as you possibly could. Everything that is, times a godzillion, will you destroy and create it, please?
Yes.
Right and wrong, good and bad, pod and pock, all nine shorts, boys and beyonds. Now, I know the words can seem strange, so I'm just going to ask everybody out there listening to do this clearing statement with me one time, because I'd like you to have this as a tool in your life. I'd like you to have it as a tool you can use to change anything you want to change. So I'm going to have everybody out there listening, even though you're forensically strange, if you're listening at a computer or like a work cubicle or something. Here's what so I'm going to say the clearing statement really slowly, and I'm going to have you repeat it. I'll say it twice, and I'll have you repeat it each time. Okay, so actually, let's do this. Think of something that you want to change. Think of something like maybe it's a financial situation, which was one of the things I wanted to change years ago, that and the struggle and the depression. Maybe it's feeling like you don't know what your purpose in life is. Maybe it's feeling like you've just had a separation with somebody or a disconnection in your relationship that you'd like to change. Just get whatever it is that you'd like to change and just get the energy of it. And I'm going to ask everything that holds that in place, will you now let it go? Will you destroy and uncreate the limitation that keeps the heaviness in place? And if the answer is yes for all of you, cool, thank you. And so we're just going to do the clearing statement together. Right and wrong.
Right and wrong.
Good and bad.
Good and bad.
Pod and pock.
Pod and pock.
All nine.
All nine.
Shorts.
Shorts.
Boys.
Boys.
And beyonds.
And beyonds.
Okay, well, all I have to go on is the energy. When we're doing this call and there are people listening all around the world, and what I've got to go on is the energy. In other words, I tap into everybody's energy as they're listening and sort of get a sense of the energy that shifts. I may not know what's specifically shifting for people, but I can get a sense as it goes from sort of heavy and locked up to more space. So for those of you listening, I just ask you to pay attention. Just notice what you notice. Notice what's lighter. Notice what changes. Notice if some energy goes through your body or something. That's this thing working. When I first came to Access, I had no idea what was going on energetically with anything. And, I was a chiropractor, and it was like I had no idea about energy. And so what happened, though, after a few times of running this clearing statement, I went and took this little breath. And then I noticed the next time somebody ran the clearing statement and did one of these processes, I went, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a way of knowing when it's happening. Yay! So just ask, if you if energy has not been your thing, don't worry, it wasn't mine either. In fact, I hated it because every girlfriend I ever had when I was studying metaphysics and sort of the spiritual end of things, we'd go to a meditation or something, and they go, okay, close your eyes, envisioning yourself going through a veil, and now look at your feet, what kind of shoes you're wearing. And I'd be like, I don't see anything. What are you talking about? And my girlfriend would be sitting next to me going, oh my God, I see the most beautiful pair of stilettos. And I'm like, man, I'm like the redheaded stepchild of energy work. What the heck is going on here, If you're out there feeling like that, believe me, I totally understand. Please try to get this with your mind. Unless you want to go to the farthest end of physics, that science will apply to this. Everything else you're trying to do for it won't actually work, because this actually functions beyond the place where your cognitive mind can limit it. So please just go with what feels different and what shows up differently in your life, because that's what you're going to notice as a result of having done just what we've done today. Is you'll be in a situation that would have limited you before, or would have been like, let's say you'll be in a situation with a person where before you would have sort of caved in or closed down, and all of a sudden you don't cave in anymore. You're just there, present as you. And you'll be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, what happened? Why am I not weird around them? Well, maybe this call had something to do with it, or I hope this call had something to do with it. But that's what you'll notice, is just that things will feel different to you without you having to know how you got there.
I love those words. Okay, now let me play a little bit of it's not even devil's advocate, but the sort of inner brain that comes in. And so I'm going to kind of speak for everybody, for some of the people who are listening who might be like, okay, but wait a minute. You just said this random group of words, and I'm supposed to just believe that that's going to somehow clear my energy. How is that even possible? You know how our conscious minds want to go, how is that even possible? So what do you say to that?
I say, I totally get you. I would say, brothers and sisters, I totally understand, because I have the same point of view. And so, I'm here several years on the other side of having used this thing and had it actually change my life so much that what I say is just try it out. Number one, I say try it out. First, play with it. Just see what it can change. But number two, see, the thing is, it's short form for about 6 pages of material. And the way this material came into existence was basically by following the energy. The way it first came into existence was Gary Douglas, the founder of Access. He was doing work on people, and he was like, you know what? If there was some way to go back to the moment where the limitation started, if we could undo it from the moment right before it started, would the limitation still exist? And he's like, okay, how could I do that? And he found out that if he accessed a certain wavelength or frequency of energy, if you will, that it would go back to the place in time where this energy started and unlock it. And then he went, okay, can I do this so it's universally usable? In other words, so somebody who can't necessarily access that same frequency or wavelength that I can just naturally, can I create a way for them to do it too? And out of that, the clearing statement was born. It's kind of like this. It's like, if you can imagine, you're going on the path of your life, right? And here you are, you happen to be on your path, and on one side is a cliff, and on the other side, on one side is a cliff, and on the other side is a mountain. And here's this big oak tree, this big limitation of your life. And you can't go through it, you can't go around it, and you can't seem to see any other way. Well, what this clearing statement does is, in traditional methods of changing things, what happens is, you go in and you cut it down, you try to cut down this oak tree, and you have to make sure to get all the pieces and all the branches and everything, and it takes a long, 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 long time. And you have to make sure to try to get every piece of it so it doesn't regrow. Well, what we're doing with this is we're following a leaf down the branch, down to the roots, and go back in time to where the seed started and vaporizing the seed out of existence. It's basically taking that seed of limitation, and where right in that moment where it was about to spring into existence and vaporize it, what would happen to the tree? It would just disappear. And so what this does, I think one of the reasons a lot of people in their cognitive minds a lot of times go, oh, well, that couldn't possibly work, is because it works so fast that literally things that I used to visualize for 45 minutes to change one thing on, in the same amount of time, I can change over 1,000 things now.
Wow. And I've personally felt a huge shift in me before with this. So I am, a believer in it, but I felt like, okay, I have to pose this question because what you said is so important that just try it. It's almost like, well, what if it works? Right?
Exactly. What if it is actually true? What if it works? And what if, and I'm so grateful you asked the question, because that's absolutely, there's a lot of people that are sitting in that place. And I think a lot of them are sitting in that place because they've been promised a lot of things in the course of their life that haven't panned out and they haven't worked, Right. And so I think a lot of people are gun shy. They're like, oh yeah, another thing promising to change everything right now. And I'm like, no, I'm not promising to change anything, but it does that, but I'm not promising that. It's like it really, I had a lady who, I just did a one-day money class in Dublin, actually. And this one particular lady said, you know what? I just want to thank you, because I was coming to this class expecting the same old thing about money, where we do the same old stuff and we set goals and we talk about this and that. She's like, this was totally different. But not only that, and this class was 10 days ago, okay? She said, not only that, my money situation has already changed. She's like, the way I feel about the debt that I had is totally different. But not only that, I'm making more money right now already. And I was like, yes, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm the same way. It's like the reason I wanted to kill myself was because all the things I had tried to do to create change didn't friggin' work. So I understand, and I'm so grateful that you're willing to take that role and ask that for people, because I was one of them people. So totally understand.
Right. So here we are. This is Manifest Everything Now, and I truly believe that everything is possible. What's the difference between manifestation and creation?
Great question. See, manifestation is how things show up. And a lot of people have said, oh, I want to manifest this, I want to manifest that, but it doesn't show up, because what you're saying to the universe is, I want to how this shows up, this. And the universe is like, you got screwed up English, baby. So it's like creation is actually a totally different point of view. Creation and actualization. So rather than saying I want to manifest this, two things. There's two difficulties with the idea, and that is that manifest means how this shows up. And also, whenever you say want has 27 definitions that mean to lack, and one that means to desire. So when you say, for example, I want more money, what you're saying to the universe is, I lack of more money. Please, if you want to start creating differently, please take the word want out of your vocabulary, unless it means something you truly don't have and you're aware that you're not having it. Because when you say I want more money, you're saying I lack of having more money. So what happens is, for example, people who have lots of money never say I want money or I want this. They say I'll have this. I'm going to create this. And that's a key distinction. So in the difference between manifestation and creation, you want to realize that creation is actually bringing something into existence. And what might be a more accurate term is actualization. So if you go, okay, I'd like to actualize this. Or even better yet, if you can ask a question, what's it going to take for this to show up for me? You don't even have to worry about, okay, is it actualize, is it manifest, is it create, what is it? You just go, okay, what's it going to take for this to show up for me? And that one question can open the door to the universe actually starting to support you in creating it. So that's one of the questions you want to have. What's it going to take for this to show up? And one other question you want to ask is, how does it get any better than this? Whenever something good happens or when something bad happens, how does it get any better than this? Because it'll make a bad situation better. It'll make a good situation even better than it just got. So how does it get any better than this is a question you want to start asking in your life. I had a couple from Denmark who I had shared with them this tool at a week-long workshop that I was giving in Europe. And they came to me and they said, you gave us so many tools, but the one that really stuck with us was, how does it get any better than this? And we want to thank you so much because it's changed our whole life. I have gotten a different job. My wife has finally gotten a job and she was looking forever. Our little girl who was so mean is actually starting to become nice. And I was like, from just how does it get any better than this? And they were like, yeah, but we ask it all the time for everything. Thank you so much. And I was like, wow, you never know what it's going to take to change something for someone.
I love that because of course, when you say it, I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense why that would be a complete, vibrational shift, especially with how we habitually look at things. So talk to me about this because we're talking a lot about words and, with creation, what role does the energetic meaning of words play when it comes to creation?
Well, I think the difficulty is a lot of us have sort of taken the common vernacular of what things are supposed to mean, but before they'd had that common vernacular, they meant something else for thousands of years, and that seems to be the weight that they seem to have. So I think it's really the energy that each word has can either assist your creation or it can subtract from your creation. And what I'm looking to do is just give people some real simple things. In other words, look at sort of the pitfalls that a lot of us make in the largest ways and try to give them the simplest tools possible so they can avoid the largest pitfalls, not sort of try to think themselves into, okay, did I use the correct word when I asked for this or did I use the wrong word? Because that kind of, trying to monkey mind our way around things ends up being really counterproductive. So what I'm looking at is just let people know, for want as an example or manifest as an example, if you're using it appropriately what ends up happening is the thing you're asking for can show up a lot quicker. If you're saying, I want more money, and you'd actually like to have more money, saying, I want more money is going to be counterproductive to creating it. So it's basically just that and realizing that want means to lack. And when you're saying I lack, that's what you end up creating. And that's what I'd like to get people out of creating, is the lack of anything.
Now, so what is it, and you might say that's exactly what I was just talking about. What's the biggest thing? If I was like, okay, Dain, what's the biggest thing that stops us from creating our reality and creating the reality that we actually are excited about? What is the biggest thing that stops us?
I think actually believing and knowing that it can exist and that we can have it. I think somewhere we know we're far greater than we've given ourselves credit for being. And somewhere we know we should be able to create beyond the limitations that we've created, and yet we keep seeing the limitations show up time and again. And so we can know it all we want, but if it doesn't actualize in our reality, then it's kind of irrelevant knowing it. So that's why the thing for me is giving people tools they can use right now. Like, listen to this call again, let the processes run on you, find things that you can use this POC and POD thing on, which is basically anything you want. Just think of anything you want to change. You go, everything that doesn't allow it to change, POC and POD all that. Or if you go, all that weird stuff Dain said the other day, and it still works. Or you can do the clearing statement, the right and wrong, good and bad, POD and POC, all nine, shorts, boys, and beyond, and it'll work. And that's the way I do it, because I'm so anal, it's like I want to make sure I've got my I's dotted and my T's crossed. So I say it full bore every time because, well, that's just my own insanity. But you don't even have to do that because it's got an energy to it that's designed to change. And I think the other thing that is one of the big things is we don't realize that the universe has our back. It's like nobody's ever explained to us, you know what? You're not only beautiful, you're phenomenal, you're amazing, you're powerful, and you're potent. And the universe literally has your back. And if we would recognize that, what would happen is we would start to create from this place of, wow, and just ask yourself this question. If I knew the universe had my back, what would I choose to create today that I wouldn't choose otherwise? And how could I be today that I couldn't be otherwise? What starts to happen is you use these tools more, you start to buy out of this limited reality that we've been handed as though it's your only choice. And you start to realize, okay, I can create the things I'd like to create. I can change the things I'd like to change. And when you have that awareness, and when you start to see things actually change, and you know they're changed and they don't come back, then life starts to get fun, because then it becomes an adventure, not a drudgery, thinking that you can't change what you want to.
I love it. Okay, so how does time play into all of this? So many people are like, yeah, but the speed that I want to create it, I want it now, and how does that all come into play?
One of the things I'd say about that is, for me, access truly is the fastest thing that I have ever found as far as changing things. I alluded to when I used to use visualization earlier to go back and change things, because it was one of the tools that I was presented with. And the thing about access that I've noticed is that it literally will change things in a fraction of the time. And so if you're one of those people who's really impatient, if you're one of those people who likes to really have things move fast, this may be something you want to check out. Because for me, this is the only thing I've ever found that moves fast enough for me. Everything else, I would get so bored. It was like I could do it for maybe a day or 2 days, and then I'd be so bored I'd want to just kick furniture to do something to entertain myself. You know what I mean? This continues to change. It always meets you where you are, and it's the fastest friggin' change that I've ever found in my life. So I say it's for the humanoids of the world. And the humanoids are those people who are the seekers, the people who've always desired something different, just haven't known how to create it. They're the people who, like Da Vinci was a humanoid, for example. He was like, what else can I create? What else can I create? What else can I create? And they're the people who truly change the world if they give themselves permission to do it. Richard Branson, Oprah, those are just some examples of the humanoids of the world. What if you're more like them than you've been giving yourself credit for being?
I love that. That's what a great way of looking at things. Okay, here's a word that it came up actually when I introduced you, and I need to address it because it has this weird, some people have a really positive charge on it and some people have a negative charge on it, and the word is magic. So talk to me about what, when you refer to magic, what you're referring to, and is everyone capable of, quote unquote, playing with it?
Yeah, that's a really good point, by the way. The positive and the negative that gets associated with magic. For me, what magic is the capacity to ask and receive and change. And also the awareness that we've got a greater connection, a greater communion, if you will, with the molecules around us, with the universe around us, that if we actually allowed ourselves to come out of the little bubble we keep ourselves in as though it actually protects us anyway, even though it doesn't, if we could come out of that bubble and allow ourselves to actually receive from the elements around us, from the plants, from the animals, from the trees, from the birds, and not just that, though, because we look at that and we go, well, how's that going to put money in my bank account? How's that going to change my relationship? How's that going to make me feel better with kids? But that's one part of sort of an overall living view of the world, which is where you can ask and actually change the things in your life you'd like to change. So when I talk about magic, I'm talking about the capacities that we have to be even greater than we allow ourselves to be right now, and allow ourselves to change things and allow them to show up differently. And I think there are a lot of us that have been looking for that, which is why Harry Potter was so darn popular. It wasn't just because it was a kid's book. Adults, there were more, as I'm sure you know, there were way more adults that read Harry Potter than kids. It was popular because it accessed some aspect of what we know should be true for us that we don't seem to be finding. One of the things I love about Access is it starts accessing your capacities, your talents and abilities. And from my point of view, that's really what the magic is, when your capacities get to show up and you don't have to judge them anymore. You don't have to hide from them, and you can start to use them to create your life.
Yeah, that's perfect. And actually even what I'm thinking as you were talking, I was like, you know what? It's actually, I would say most people want magic. They're just scared to admit it, or, it's that thing. So I think the negative charge has less to do with, oh, magic, blah, blah, and more like, well, that's really what I want. I want things to be sort of magical and miraculous, and, but I'm terrified to admit that, because what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
That's exactly. Just another, right? That's just another one of those, hey, whose is this? Where did that come from?
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so is there anything, in your opinion, that is not possible?
Well, quite frankly, no. However, I would put a caveat on that, which is basically the time frame of it. Because what happens is, what we tend to do is we tend to go, oh, I want $1 million, which, once again, I lack of $1 million, but I want $1 million. And if it doesn't show up tomorrow, we think, oh, it can't exist. I think given enough, and I put time into the equation because I don't think there's anything that's not possible. I mean, for example, it's like I've worked with people who've had cancer, who've had HIV, who've had all kinds of things, and seen them change it. But I've had about a 50% success rate with that because it's always their choice. So anything is possible if you give someone enough of what's required for them to see the value of choosing something different and or greater than what they're choosing right now.
I love that. What a great way of putting it. And it's true. It's like there needs to be something in us that believes it's possible. So it's not like, well, if it didn't show up in 30 seconds, so, well, I'm off to the next thing, right? So we kind of need to allow it to be possible.
To actually realize, to believe that it's possible, but then also, within a short amount of time, you actually have to see evidence of some form of change showing up, whether that's feeling lighter when you think about the situation, or whether that's seeing the actual numbers in your bank account change, or whether that's actually feeling more of a closeness in your relationship. Whatever it is that you're looking to change, there's got to be evidence of that change showing up. And I think that's one of the most important things, is that's how you know when change is happening, when things actually change. And people don't get that a lot of times. They're like, well, I've done this 10,000 times for a year and a half. And I'm like, and it's not different yet? You need to be doing something else. From my point of view, when you use Access, if things aren't different within days, we need to look at something else. And if you don't at least feel different about it, then, or feel some energy moving or feel something changing, then time to do something else. Let's change our
Wow.
approach. Let's use something different.
Okay, well, that actually makes me want to hear a couple of stories of people that you've worked with, because, you know, I love that, because you're right. We're all looking for something that can happen quickly, and I love that you're even like, look, if you haven't seen or felt even just your energy change, then that's a powerful thing to say. It's very freeing, actually, to hear. So can you share with us a couple of stories of people you've worked with and some of the turnarounds you've seen them experience?
Oh boy, where does one begin? like how long do you have? Let me tell you about this sweet Indian lady that I worked with that actually I didn't even work with her in person. She actually got some of the classes in the download. She got some loops of processes, and she got some online classes. Well, I saw her live in a class a few days ago. And oh my God, this sweet, beautiful Indian woman who is living, if you look, I mean, she's from India, living a traditional Indian lifestyle. And she came up to me and gave me the sweetest hug I think I've ever had in my life, with tears in her eyes. And she says, thank you. She said, I love you, Dr. Dain. And I said, thank you. What happened? You know, like, what's changed? And she went, you know, she's like, I was so insecure being me, and I had so many insecurities, and I was so afraid all the time, and I just wouldn't even look anybody in the eyes. She's like, that is all different for me now, and I now know I have value, and my kids who used to be in judgment of me come up to me and tell me, thank you for being our mommy. And I'm like, wow. I mean, that is just one example. I mean, I get thousands of emails a year from people who tell me things like that, who tell me, like, I worked with one lady who had things going on in her body. She had tumors, and we worked, and she listened to some process loops also. And after one session in these loops, she called me and said, that tumor that I had, it's gone. And the MDs think that the first ultrasound must have been inaccurate because there wasn't anything to be found on the second ultrasound. And I'm like, yes. And there was a lady who sent me, and I got to tell you, hearing things like that from people is truly the greatest gift I get from doing this work. Seeing the change that people get. I mean, I was in their place when I first started Access. You know, before I came to Access, I was in their place. So hearing them tell me about these changes is one of the coolest things it is. I had a lady send me an email the other day, and it just brought me to tears. She said, I met you at a book signing. She said, and I had heard about you and I had heard about Access, so I had seen some stuff online, and I saw that you were coming to my town, and so I went to the book signing. She said, and at that book signing, you were talking about, you know, some of the other things that I could do. She said, quite frankly, I didn't know if my van was going to make it to the book signing because it was so close to falling apart, but I made it. And my kids were there, and even though they were throwing Skittles on the floor, she said, you were nice to them. And she said, it seemed almost like you wanted to get down on the floor and play with them. And I felt so honored and acknowledged, because when I was driving by the bookstore, I almost didn't want to come in because there were so many people in there that were so nicely dressed. And my children and I were so poorly dressed. And yet you and the people that you work with had no judgment of us at all. And I was like, oh my gosh. And because I remember that place, of being there with absolutely no money, with the most ratty clothes in the world, you know, being around people who seem to have everything together. And she said, I want to say, first of all, thank you. And I want you to know that I've done some of these classes that you offer now. I've done some of the online stuff. And I want you to know that things are changing for me. I now hold my head up high. She said, I had my husband come and yell at me, and I put down all my barriers like you talked about. And I did some of the clearings that you said, and instantly he got calmer and he walked away. And I went, wow. And she said at the very end, she said, I just want you to know that no matter what it takes, she said, I too wanted to kill myself shortly before I met you. She said, but not only do I not now, she said, now I know I'm going to find the greatness of me no matter what it takes. And
wow.
Oh,
Yeah, it must be amazing, especially since you were, as you said before, you were them. So, I mean, how exciting for you to realize that effect, that ripple effect, and what an amazing thing. I love those stories. They're fantastic because you can really feel the difference that, the transformations that were going on. And that's why I'm doing this. I mean, this is what I'm excited about doing, is being able to help people find the trueness of them and take control of their lives and create the lives that they've always wanted and maybe started to question weren't possible. There's so much more, by the way, Dain, obviously, to learn from you. You've been amazing. Your energy is incredible. I did ask you to create a special offer for everyone who's listening to the call. To access this page for yourself, simply click on the special offer button that's on this page. Everyone, I highly encourage you, go to Dain's special offer right now so you can experience this for yourself as he talks us through. And Dain, go for it. Let us know what we'll find there.
Okay, so the first thing is an online class that I did called Stepping into Your Capacities and Creating a New Earth. And this particular class, see, one of the things that I've been aware of for a long time is the earth wants to give to us. It wants to kind of like be our mother, We call it Mother Earth for a reason, but a lot of us don't realize that we can receive a heck of a lot of energy from this beautiful planet. And we don't realize that also it's kind of got sort of like a true north, if you will, something that can actually be centering for us and guiding for us. And what this class is actually about accessing that and getting to that place where we can actually allow ourselves to step into our capacities to create abundance, for example, to create money, for example, to create greater relationships, to create less separation. And literally all of those things are discussed in this class. So the next thing that comes with it, though, is this loop of processes. It's an hour of processes, kind of like we did with that clearing statement, where I go into some different things that you would never think about would be limiting you. And together we undo them as you listen to these processes. And I'll run something like, hey, what unawareness are you using to create the limitation in your financial reality that you are choosing? And then will you destroy and uncreate it? Right, wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all nine, choice, boys, round. Well, there are processes. It's a loop that is an hour long. And what happens is you can even listen to these things while you sleep. It'll literally change what you do while you sleep if you listen to it. And the interesting thing about it is, like for me, in my pursuit of change, before I found Access, something that worked really dynamically, I used to do subliminal tapes. And I'd listen to them while I slept, or I'd listen to them while I was taking a nap or whatever. And yet nothing ever freaking changed. What I noticed with these is I listen and things change. And how do you know the change is occurring? Well, partially because you start to feel different. You start to feel more like you. And when I say that to some people, they go, what do you mean feel more like me? And I'm like, well, have you ever woken up and known there wasn't anything wrong with you? Have you ever woken up and known you've got a greater capacity and then we're just willing to be it? And people are like, yeah, well, that's part of what you get from this. But also what you get is the undoing of the limitations, the energetic blocks, if you will, that you put around you that keep you from having and creating the life you'd actually like to create. So the next thing is, the third thing is this wonderful class that I recently completed called Being You, Changing the World. It's an MP3 download, and it's a class that I did in Copenhagen, Denmark. And there were 200 people in the room, and we talk about everything from what it takes to actually create happiness to some of the tools that it takes to actually become joyful to what it would actually be like if you being you could change the things in your life you want to change. And it literally, I had people send me emails after this class and say, thank you so much. I felt sort of disconnected from my life and disconnected from what I knew was true for me before I attended this. And this is people who attended it live. And they said, and now, like, I've just got a different sense of me and I've taken it everywhere and it hasn't gone away. So that's part of what I hope people are able to get out of this particular MP3 download. And the beauty of it is, listening to the MP3 download, you get the same exact energy that people that were in the class got. And for some people, they get even more. Next thing, now this is exciting. This excites me. And I know if it excites me, well, then it's darn exciting. The next one is actually a live telecall with me. And it's called Being You, Creating Your Future. And what we're going to do on that call is we're going to get online, and I'm going to sort of tap into the energy of everybody there. They're going to get the email questions or send in questions. And I'm going to take the questions that actually apply to the subject and apply to everybody on the call. And we're going to do processes and clearing and have a conversation together about actually getting to the place where you can create a different future, because creating the future is different than what most people think it is. We think the future is a solidity, but it's not. There are these whispers of the future that when you tune into them and allow yourself to listen to them, allow yourself to hear them and function from that place, what happens is you start to be able to find what it will really take to create what you desire, not what you've been told it will take. And it is different than most of us have been told. And so on that class, we're also going to do processes. And the more you listen to the processes that are there, the deeper the clearing will go. The next thing is an online class called The Hedonistic Adventures of Living. And here's the thing. Hedonism gets a really bad rap. It's actually the pursuit of pleasure. Now, but if you can imagine, what if more of your life were actually lived for the pleasure of it and the joy of it and the possibilities that it could bring? What if that's where you chose your relationships from? What if that's where you chose your job from? What if that's where you chose what you do financially? From there, from the pleasure of it, what if you actually started allowing yourself to have the pleasure and the joy of your body? That's what this class is meant to invite people to. And in addition to that, there's an hour-long loop of processes that you can listen to while you sleep. You can listen to them while you drive. Well, driving we may want to put a, do not operate heavy machinery while listening to this, because some people, I've literally had people call me and say, okay, you need to put a warning label on these processes. I'm like, what are you talking about? They say, I was driving and I got so spaced out as this energy was running that I forgot I was driving. So you need to test them out before driving with them. But literally, you can listen to them anytime. And also, one of the beauties of this is what this particular set of processes does is it takes all that stuff that you've done to yourself to make it so your life and living is not about the joy of it. And the joy of it is where the abundance comes in, where the ease with money comes in, where the ease with relationships comes in. It's where the ease comes in everything. And most of us have been taught that being joyful is bad and that it's wrong and that we need to work harder. But if you see the people that are truly successful in the world that have an ease with money and everything else, it's not because they work at it, it's because they actually enjoy their lives. What this set of processes does is go to the core of what doesn't allow that and unlock it and pop it open so that you can actually start having more of the joy of being you. And the other thing about all of these classes and processes is what happens is you can play them at any time. Like there are lots of times, like for example, when I go visit certain family members, I have these things on my iPhone and I play them on a really low volume. And rather than being around my family and going, I just want to kill people and or crunch back into that smallness that I used to be when I was little and all that sort of thing, it doesn't happen because this thing is sort of like an energy that lifts you up. And that's part of what we require in our lives is somewhere, some source of energy, some source of contribution to us that lifts us up and acknowledges us as a being and acknowledges us with our capacities. That's what all of these things are designed to do. So you can actually play them, keep them with you, play them anytime, and you'll get even more change. And now the next thing is a class I called Ending Stupidity, Creating a New Reality. One of the things that I became acutely aware of is that we tend to function from a lot of unawareness. And the only time we create a difficulty in our lives is when we function from less awareness than we actually have. Well, I've termed that stupidity. And basically, so what happens is when we say, hey, it's about coming out of the places where you made yourself unaware. So I'm not saying that you're stupid. Basically, here's what it is that we tend to judge ourselves as stupid for creating the things in our lives that don't work. This is about undoing that and also undoing the judgments you've had of you for being stupid your whole life. You are so not stupid. The only difficulty is you're far more brilliant than you've ever given yourself credit for. And unfortunately, no one you know has ever been able to acknowledge how truly brilliant you are. That's what this is about, is actually getting there. And then once again, the processes that go with that to undo and change all of that from its core. And what you notice after listening to these is you walk around the world in a different space. A lot of people tell me, wow, you know what? I've got a sense of the space of being me that I've never had before. And then there are a few other things that go along here, which I'm really happy about. One is a quick start guide to using the Access tools. It's a PDF that was created by the Access team. And Your Reality in the Free Will Universe. This is me reading the intro and first chapter of my Being You, Changing the World book. It's a 55-minute audio. But one of the things that people have told me about this audio is they say they play it at different times. And by the time they're at the end of this audio, they're like, I feel like I'm me again. So if you've ever had one of those times in your life where you feel like you don't know what to do, you feel totally disconnected, listen to this thing. It's there as a gift intended to get you back to the energy of whatever it is to be you. My latest book called Being You, Changing the World, I wrote it for that reason, and this is part of that. So it's one of the extra resources that's included. And then also an explanation of the clearing statement. The right and wrong, good and bad, pot and pock, all 9 shorts, boys and beyond. Yes, it is actually explained. Each word is explained. So for those of you who are kind of like me, where you're one of those people who wants to know the why about everything, like a little kid, why? Well, if you're like that at all, then you'll really want to listen to this because it explains the Access clearing statement too. So that's all included in the package because I wanted to create something that would truly create change in people's lives.
This sounds amazing. And I do particularly love that they get to do that direct call with you. I think what an incredible thing to actually, have the chance to have clearing statements run and all of that on something that is, a particular thing for you. And it all sounds incredible. What are some of the biggest benefits that people can expect to experience starting, literally right away, as well as over time, but really what should they start to expect, pretty quickly after starting to use this?
I'd say one of the biggest things is just feeling different about you. Being able to wake up and not feel like you're the biggest pile of poo on the planet, for example, if you happen to be in that state. And also the other thing that changes, first thing is feeling differently about you, but the other thing that changes is having a sense that things can be different. Having a sense of hope again and a sense of possibility again. See, the thing is, we truly have far greater capacities than we've ever given ourselves credit for. What this does is it actually acknowledges the energy of that. And when I say the energy of that, it's like if you've ever been around somebody who looked at you with no judgment, who saw you as beautiful, no matter what you were wearing, but just saw past all the facades and all of the walls and all the barriers to the being that you are. That's what fundamentally each one of these classes and each one of these process loops do is they acknowledge that the you that you are, and it invites it to come out. So if you can imagine what it would be like living your life, having that you show up, that's what starts to happen over the longer term. It starts to happen over the shorter term, and over the shorter term, you're like, wow, I just feel better. Okay, cool. And I got a sense of possibility again. And over the longer term, what people have told me is, wow, I just started with Access 6 months ago, but I'm feeling lighter day by day, but I look back at 6 months ago, and I can't believe I'm the same person, and neither can the people that know me. So this is part of what happens long term is more of that you starts to show up in every interaction in your life.
Wow. And how powerful is that? I mean, when we talk about, creating the life that you're wanting to create, that's how you do it, is by you showing up. So that's what an amazing thing. And 6 months, by the way, is not that long. So that's, you just said 6 months, and I was like, that's not very long. That's absolutely incredible.
Experience today's package for yourself simply by clicking on the special offer button.
Dain, you've been amazing. What are the thoughts that you want to share with us? What do you want us to take away right now as we, head off of this call and leave you? What do you want us to know?
Well, if there were nothing not possible and not changeable for you, what would you choose? And if the tools are actually there to change it, would you demand of yourself that you choose them? Or would you let them go and hope that they would come back to you another day? Please know what's true makes you feel lighter, a lie makes you feel heavier. So would you be willing to follow what makes you feel lighter in this and everything else? And what if you truly realized, what if you truly being you is the gift and the change this world requires? It is.
Wow. Perfect way to end the call. I just can't think of any other better words to say. Thank you so much, Dain. You've been incredible. Thank you, everyone. You are just a remarkable group of people that I am blessed to be able to spend time with. Until the next time, until our paths cross again, everyone keep manifesting. Bye-bye, everyone.